Welcome to Life Stories, where we explore powerful tales of love, loss, and redemption. In today's story, we dive into the lives of Emily and Jack, a couple whose journey through betrayal and resilience teaches profound lessons about strength, forgiveness, and self-discovery, as Emily rises above the shadows of heartbreak to reclaim her identity, and Jack faces the consequences of his actions. Their paths reveal the unbreakable spirit of personal growth. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to join us in this inspiring journey. Let's begin today's story with Life Stories. Jack Morrison was the kind of man everyone seemed to admire. From his sleek corner office in the heart of San Francisco, he orchestrated deals that turned ideas into empires. On the surface, his life was enviable: a booming business, financial security, and a beautiful wife, Emily, who had been by his side since the beginning. Yet, beneath the polished exterior lay a man who was restless, someone who found himself questioning the choices that had brought him to this point. Emily Morrison, in contrast, represented stability and quiet strength. She had been Jack's anchor through the stormy early years when his dreams of success had often seemed more like a fantasy than an achievable reality. Emily's charm lay in her simplicity, a humility that didn't demand attention, a kindness that warmed everyone she met, and a deep, enduring love for Jack that had once been the center of his world. But time, as it so often does, had shifted things. Jack, now immersed in San Francisco's high society, began to feel that Emily's modest demeanor didn't align with the image he wanted to project. His world had become one of glittering galas, high-stakes meetings, and polished facades, and Emily's reluctance to embrace this lifestyle grated on him in ways he didn't like to admit. It was during this period of discontent that Olivia Hayes entered Jack's life. Olivia was everything Emily wasn't, or so Jack told himself. A marketing executive with a flair for the dramatic, Olivia knew how to command attention. Her confidence radiated in every gesture. Her laughter filled rooms, and her style turned heads wherever she went. She was intoxicating in the way a dangerous indulgence often is, and Jack found himself drawn to her like a moth to a flame. Their affair began with subtle glances and whispered conversations that quickly escalated into something Jack tried to justify as harmless. Olivia became his escape, a place where he could shed the weight of his insecurities and bask in the admiration he craved. Before long, Jack was introducing Olivia as his wife at events, rationalizing that it was merely a tool to impress potential clients. Emily, meanwhile, carried on as she always had, tending to their home and managing the little details of their life that Jack often overlooked. She wasn't blind to the changes in him: the late nights, the unexplained charges on their account, and the growing distance between them. Jack had always been ambitious, but now he seemed consumed by something more insidious, something Emily couldn't quite name. She noticed how he avoided her gaze, how his answers to simple questions were often curt or evasive. And then there was the perfume, a scent too bold to be hers, that lingered faintly on his shirts. But Emily, ever thoughtful, didn't rush to confront him. Instead, she observed, her quiet strength allowing her to process what was happening without letting her emotions cloud her judgment. It wasn't that Emily didn't feel the sting of betrayal, she did. Acutely. Every glance Jack avoided, every excuse he offered, chipped away at the trust they had built over years of shared dreams and sacrifices. But Emily's love for Jack wasn't something that could be erased overnight. It was a love forged in hardship, in the days when they had barely enough to scrape by and still found joy in each other's company. In her heart, Emily knew that the man she had married was still there, buried beneath the weight of his ambition and the allure of something new. But she also knew that love alone couldn't fix what had broken between them. So, instead of confronting Jack in anger, she turned to the one person she trusted implicitly: Ryan Carter. Ryan had been Emily's closest friend since college, a sharp-witted lawyer with an uncanny ability to see through facades. When Emily confided in him, his concern was immediate and unwavering. "You're too smart to let him take you for granted," he said one evening as they sat in her living room, the shadows of the setting sun playing across the walls. "But you also need to protect yourself, Emily. If this goes further, you'll need more than your intuition, you'll need proof." Emily nodded, her resolve solidifying. She wasn't ready to give up on Jack, but she wasn't willing to be blindsided either. Over the next few weeks, with Ryan's guidance, she began quietly gathering evidence. She tracked Jack's spending, took note of his increasingly erratic schedule, and even began piecing together his whereabouts when he claimed to be working late. All the while, Emily maintained her composure. She cooked Jack's favorite meals, tended to their garden, and greeted him with the same gentle smile she always had. But beneath the surface, she was preparing for a confrontation she knew was inevitable. Jack, oblivious to Emily's quiet vigilance, continued to bask in the thrill of his double life. Olivia's confidence and charm were a balm to his ego, her presence at his side making him feel invincible. He convinced himself that Emily would never find out, that she was too naive, too wrapped up in their domestic life to notice the cracks forming in their marriage. But Jack underestimated Emily. He always had. And as the days passed, the strength and patience she wielded so quietly began to take shape as something far more formidable than Jack could have imagined. Emily wasn't just waiting, she was preparing. And while Jack reveled in the illusion of control, Emily was laying the groundwork for the reckoning that would eventually shatter it. As Jack's double life continued, Emily found herself navigating a quiet storm of emotions. Betrayal simmered beneath her composed exterior, but so too did a deep sadness. She hadn't married Jack for the man he was now, someone consumed by appearances and intoxicated by the admiration of strangers. She had married the dreamer, the man who had once spent long nights at their kitchen table sketching out business plans, his eyes bright with hope. The man who would pause mid-thought to kiss her forehead and thank her for believing in him. But now, that dreamer seemed like a distant memory. Jack barely looked her in the eye, his once warm laughter now reserved for phone calls and meetings she wasn't privy to. Their home, once alive with shared ambitions and love, had grown cold. Jack's absence was no longer just physical, it had seeped into the very air they shared. Emily was no stranger to sacrifice. She had left behind her own career ambitions to support Jack when he had nothing but potential. She had seen the company grow, brick by brick, and had been content knowing that her quiet contributions were the foundation of his success. But this was something else entirely. As the weeks passed, Emily became increasingly aware of the patterns in Jack's behavior. His excuses about late-night meetings were often vague, and his explanations for extravagant charges rang hollow. The tension between them was palpable, though Jack seemed either oblivious or unwilling to address it. He floated through their home like a ghost, his focus clearly elsewhere. It was during one of Jack's unexplained absences that Emily allowed herself to admit the truth. Sitting alone in their living room, a cup of tea cooling in her hands, she realized she could no longer dismiss the signs. Jack was having an affair. The thought was a jagged edge that cut deep, but Emily refused to let it consume her. Instead, she reached out to Ryan, her closest confidant. Their friendship had been forged years ago in the demanding halls of Stamford, where Ryan's sharp wit had often been the antidote to Emily's perfectionist tendencies. Now, as she recounted the changes in Jack and her growing suspicions, Ryan listened with a steady, unflinching gaze. "Emily, you've always been the strong one," Ryan said after she finished. "But strength doesn't mean enduring this in silence. You need to prepare yourself for whatever comes next." Emily nodded, her resolve hardening. She wasn't ready to confront Jack yet, she needed more information, a clearer picture of what she was up against. Ryan agreed to help her, guiding her through the process of gathering evidence. Together, they devised a plan. Emily began keeping meticulous notes, tracking Jack's movements and expenses. She learned to look for the small details, the faint traces of perfume on his collar, The way he tensed when his phone buzzed during dinner. At first, the act of surveillance felt alien to Emily, almost like a betrayal of her own values. But the more she uncovered, the more justified she felt. This wasn't about revenge, it was about understanding the depth of Jack's deception and protecting herself in a situation that seemed increasingly inevitable. Despite the turmoil swirling inside her, Emily maintained her composure. She greeted Jack with the same gentle smile when he returned home late. Even as her heart ached with the knowledge of where he'd likely been, she continued to cook his favorite meals, even though he rarely stayed long enough to eat them. It wasn't out of naivety or denial, it was strategy. Emily understood something Jack did not: strength didn't always have to be loud. Sometimes, it was in the patience to endure, the discipline to act with clarity when the time came. Jack, lost in the glamour of his new world with Olivia, believed he was untouchable. But he was underestimating Emily, as he had so often done in the past. One evening, as Emily stood in their garden tending to the flowers she had planted years ago, she felt a quiet sense of purpose. The same hands that had nurtured their life together would now steady her for the confrontation she sensed was drawing closer. Jack, meanwhile, was growing bolder. He began taking Olivia to high-profile events, introducing her as his wife to colleagues and potential clients. Emily learned this through whispers and chance encounters, each revelation adding another piece to the puzzle. But rather than lash out in anger or despair, Emily channeled her pain into determination. She didn't just want to confront Jack. She wanted him to see, with undeniable clarity, what he had sacrificed in his quest for validation. And when the moment came, Emily vowed she would not falter. Jack might have built his empire, but Emily had been its foundation, and she was about to remind him just how strong that foundation could be. Jack Morrison strode into the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel in Los Angeles, his tailored suit a perfect complement to Olivia's dazzling gown. She clung to his arm like a trophy, her laughter echoing through the air as they mingled with investors and executives. Jack reveled in the attention they drew. Here, surrounded by the glittering elite, he felt invincible. Olivia's charm and wit made every interaction seamless. And for a fleeting moment, Jack convinced himself that this was the life he deserved. What Jack failed to notice were the cracks forming beneath the surface. Investors who had once been drawn to his charisma and bold vision were beginning to ask sharper questions. The company's finances, which had flourished under Emily's quiet diligence, now carried the strain of Jack's reckless spending. Rumors circulated, whispers that Emily had been the real architect of the company's early success. Unbeknownst to Jack, Emily was not far away. With the help of Ryan's network, she had gained discreet access to this critical investor meeting. Seated quietly among the observers, Emily blended seamlessly into the crowd, her understated elegance masking the storm of emotions within her. From her vantage point, she watched Jack play his role with practiced ease, Olivia by his side, a sparkling distraction. Emily felt a pang of sadness as she observed him. This was the man she had once built a life with, reduced to a facade. Yet, the sadness quickly gave way to resolve. She hadn't come here to dwell on what was lost. She was here to reclaim what she had built, to shine a light on the truth Jack had worked so hard to obscure. The meeting began, and Jack launched into his presentation, his voice steady and polished. He spoke of innovation and growth, weaving a narrative that painted him as a visionary leader. Olivia chimed in at carefully chosen moments, her comments designed to amplify Jack's persona. To the casual observer, they appeared the perfect team, but Emily noticed the subtle unease among the investors. It was Helen Grayson, a seasoned investor known for her no-nonsense approach, who began to chip away at Jack's veneer. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her tone sharp, "you've spoken at length about your vision. But I'm curious, who was behind the operational strategies that led to the company's initial success? And why aren't they here today?" Jack hesitated, the briefest flicker of uncertainty crossing his face before he recovered. The strategies were a collaborative effort, he replied smoothly. But as CEO, I've always taken the lead in ensuring their execution. Emily's heart raced as she watched him stumble. Helen's piercing gaze suggested she wasn't convinced. Interesting, Helen said, leaning back in her chair. Because the records I've reviewed suggest otherwise. Jack's confidence faltered further as the questioning intensified. Helen's inquiries delved deeper, exposing gaps in his narrative. Olivia, sensing the shift in tone, attempted to intervene with charm, but her efforts fell flat. Her lack of genuine understanding became glaringly obvious, leaving the investors unimpressed. From her seat, Emily could see the momentum of the room shifting. This was her moment. Rising quietly, she walked to the front of the room, her presence commanding attention without needing to demand it. The room fell silent as she addressed the investors. "Forgive the interruption," Emily began, her voice steady yet firm. "But I believe it's time we have a complete picture of this company's journey." Jack turned pale, his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. Olivia froze, her polished exterior cracking as Emily took her place at the head of the table. Emily's presentation was precise and irrefutable. She recounted the company's origins, highlighting key strategies and decisions that had driven its success. Each point was supported by documentation emails, financial records, and reports that left no room for doubt. As Emily spoke, the investors leaned in, their expressions a mix of surprise and admiration. Jack's attempts to interject were met with calm, decisive responses that left him floundering. By the time Emily concluded, the room buzzed with whispered conversations. Helen was the first to break the silence. "This is the kind of leadership we need," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. Leadership rooted in integrity and substance. The shift was palpable. Support swung firmly in Emily's favor, leaving Jack stunned and Olivia visibly flustered. For the first time, Jack faced the full weight of his choices. The life he had built on deception was unraveling, and the foundation he had taken for granted, Emily, was now the very force bringing him down. As the meeting adjourned, Emily walked out with her head held high, her dignity intact. Jack, left to grapple with the fallout, could only watch as the investors surrounded Emily, eager to align themselves with her vision. For Jack and Olivia, the world they had constructed had collapsed. And for Emily, this was just the beginning of reclaiming her life. In the days following the pivotal meeting, Emily stepped into her new role with quiet determination. Though she had been thrust into the spotlight, she remained focused on stabilizing the company that she and Jack had built together. There was no time for celebration. The challenges ahead required all of her attention. Yet, for the first time in years, Emily felt a sense of clarity. She had fought for her place, and now it was time to prove her worth not just to the investors, but to herself. Her first act as interim CEO was to meet with the employees. Many had been blindsided by the revelations of Jack's mismanagement and were uncertain about the company's future. Emily's approach was direct yet empathetic. She addressed their concerns with transparency, outlining her plans to rebuild the business. She emphasized the importance of teamwork and promised to prioritize their well-being. "I know this has been a difficult time," Emily said during an all-hands meeting in the company's San Francisco office. "But together, we can create something stronger, a company we can all be proud of." Her sincerity struck a chord. Employees who had once viewed Emily as merely Jack's wife began to see her as a leader in her own right. She spent time listening to their stories, learning about their aspirations and frustrations. Her emphasis on inclusion and respect began to foster a new sense of loyalty among the workforce. Meanwhile, Jack was coming to terms with the consequences of his actions. His fall from grace had been swift and brutal. Overnight, he had become a pariah in the business world. Former allies distanced themselves, and even his closest confidants refused to return his calls. For the first time in his life, Jack felt truly alone. Olivia's departure had been as abrupt as the unraveling of his career. She had left without so much as a goodbye, her polished charm replaced by cold indifference. Jack couldn't escape the bitter irony. The woman he had sacrificed everything for had seen him as little more than a stepping stone. It was during one of these lonely nights in his empty apartment that Jack made a decision. He had spent so long blaming others for his shortcomings, Emily for being too simple, Olivia for leaving him, the investors for their lack of faith. But now, staring at his reflection in the window, he saw the truth. The fault was his. The next morning, Jack reached out to a therapist. It was a humbling step, one that forced him to confront the insecurities and arrogance that had driven him to betray the person who had loved him most. In those sessions, Jack began to unpack the choices that had led him to this point. He realized how much he had undervalued Emily not just as a partner, but as the backbone of their success. At the same time, Jack sought redemption through action. He began volunteering at a local community center in San Francisco, mentoring young entrepreneurs who were just starting out. It was a small but meaningful way to give back, and it brought him a sense of purpose that had long been missing. Emily, however, remained cautious of Jack's apparent transformation. Though she appreciated his efforts, she wasn't ready to trust him again. She had spent too many years being overshadowed, her contributions dismissed or overlooked. Now, as she found her footing in her new role, Emily was determined to move forward on her own terms. Ryan continued to be Emily's closest ally. His legal expertise and unwavering support helped her navigate the complexities of corporate leadership. Late-night strategy sessions often turned into conversations about life and resilience. Ryan's faith in Emily never wavered, and his encouragement reminded her that she was more capable than she had ever given herself credit for. As Emily implemented her plans, the company began to change. She prioritized ethical practices, revamped outdated systems, and introduced programs to support employee growth. Slowly but surely, the business began to regain its footing. Investors who had initially been wary of her quiet demeanor now praised her vision and determination. For Jack, watching Emily's rise was a humbling experience. He couldn't ignore the strength she exuded, the way she commanded respect without demanding it. Her success was a painful reminder of everything he had lost, not just the company, but the love of a woman who had been his greatest ally. Yet, instead of resentment, Jack felt a glimmer of pride. Emily had proven what he had always failed to see: she was extraordinary. And while Jack knew he could never undo the damage he had caused, he resolved to continue his journey of self-improvement, not for her, but for himself. Emily, meanwhile, embraced her new reality. Though the path had been difficult, she felt stronger than ever. She no longer saw herself as the woman standing in Jack's shadow. She was a leader, a force to be reckoned with, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The first rays of dawn spilled into Emily's office as she sat reviewing proposals for the company's next big initiative. The quiet hum of the city outside felt like a reflection of her own transformation, a steady, calm energy that belied the intensity of the journey she had undertaken. For the first time in years, Emily felt a profound sense of purpose. Not as Jack's wife, but as Emily Morrison, a leader in her own right. The changes she implemented in the company were more than cosmetic. Emily believed in the power of transparency and trust, two qualities she knew had been missing during Jack's tenure. She introduced new policies to ensure employees felt valued and included, creating programs that offered professional development, mental health resources, and flexible work options. "People are the heart of this company," Emily told her senior team during a leadership meeting. "If we take care of them, they'll take care of the business." Her words resonated deeply. The atmosphere in the office began to shift as employees felt the effects of her compassionate leadership. Productivity soared, and the company's reputation began to rebuild itself. Not through grand gestures, but through consistent, thoughtful action. Outside of work, Emily was rediscovering parts of herself she had long neglected. She enrolled in art classes at a local studio, reigniting a passion for painting that had been buried under years of sacrifice. On weekends, she visited museums, hiked trails along the California coast, and shared dinners with old friends she had lost touch with during her marriage. One of these friends, of course, was Ryan. He had been by her side through every step of the fallout, his calm wisdom a constant source of strength. Their late-night discussions, once focused on legal strategies and corporate politics, began to drift into lighter topics, shared memories, jokes, and dreams for the future. Ryan had a way of making Emily laugh, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. His presence was steady and unassuming, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of Jack's ambition. Emily found herself looking forward to their conversations, a warm glow settling in her chest whenever he entered the room. One evening, as they sat on Emily's balcony overlooking the twinkling lights of San Francisco, Ryan turned to her with a rare vulnerability. "You've come so far, Emily. I hope you know how proud I am of you." Emily felt her cheeks flush, a mix of gratitude and something deeper stirring within her. She wasn't ready to name it yet, but the connection between them was undeniable. For now, she allowed herself to savor the simplicity of the moment, a conversation with someone who saw her not as an accessory to someone else's success, but as her own person. Meanwhile, Jack was navigating his own journey. Therapy had become a cornerstone of his routine, helping him confront not only his betrayal of Emily but also the insecurities that had driven him to seek validation from Olivia. For years, he had convinced himself that ambition justified every action. But now he saw the cost of that mindset. In addition to therapy, Jack poured himself into volunteer work at a community center in Oakland. He mentored young entrepreneurs, sharing both his successes and the hard lessons he had learned. It was humbling, but also deeply rewarding. For the first time in years, Jack felt like he was contributing to something meaningful. Still, he couldn't shake the image of Emily standing confidently in that boardroom, reclaiming the space he had so carelessly tried to take from her. He had underestimated her strength, her intelligence, and her capacity for grace. Watching her thrive from afar was both painful and inspiring. Jack thought often about reaching out to her, but he held back. What could he say that would ever make up for what he had done? He wasn't sure he deserved a place in her life anymore, especially now that she was flourishing. Emily, meanwhile, continued to find her footing in both her personal and professional life. Her leadership style became a beacon for others in the corporate world, earning her invitations to speak at conferences and participate in leadership panels. Her story of resilience and integrity resonated, especially with women who had faced similar struggles. One evening, after delivering a speech at a prestigious event in Los Angeles, Emily returned to her hotel room and reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The pain of Jack's betrayal was still a part of her, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it had shaped her into someone stronger, someone who understood the value of self-respect and the importance of surrounding herself with people who uplifted her. As she looked out at the glittering skyline, Emily allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. Her life was no longer defined by someone else's ambitions. It was hers, built on a foundation of resilience, integrity, and hope. The future stretched out before her, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt ready to embrace it. For Jack, life after the fallout felt like walking through an empty house, echoes of past decisions reverberating in every corner. His once bustling schedule of meetings, events, and social engagements was now replaced by quiet mornings and long evenings spent reflecting on the man he had become. Therapy had been a turning point, forcing him to peel back the layers of arrogance and insecurity that had led him astray. Though painful, the process was freeing. Jack began to understand the roots of his choices, the fear of being ordinary, the craving for admiration, and the false belief that his value depended on external validation. Slowly, he started to see where he had gone wrong, not just with Emily, but with himself. In his volunteer work at the Oakland Community Center, Jack found a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Mentoring young entrepreneurs allowed him to share his hard-earned lessons, and he felt genuine pride when he saw them succeed. These interactions reminded him of a younger version of himself, back when his ambition was fueled by passion rather than ego. Despite the progress he was making, thoughts of Emily lingered. Jack couldn't erase the image of her standing tall in that boardroom, commanding respect with a poise and confidence he had once dismissed as too simple. He realized now how deeply he had underestimated her, not just as a partner, but as a person. One day, after months of deliberation, Jack decided to write Emily a letter. He poured his heart into it, recounting his regrets and acknowledging the pain he had caused. "You were my strength," he wrote, "and I failed to see it. I let my insecurities blind me to the incredible person you are. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you know that I am truly sorry." To his surprise, Emily agreed to meet him. They chose a quiet cafe in the Mission District, far from the corporate towers and bustling streets that had once defined their lives. Jack arrived early, nervously rehearsing what he wanted to say. When Emily walked in, she looked radiant yet composed, her presence carrying a quiet power that made Jack's chest tighten with both pride and regret. They sat across from each other, the hum of the cafe providing a gentle backdrop to their conversation. Jack began by apologizing, his voice trembling as he admitted the depth of his mistakes. He didn't try to justify his actions, nor did he ask for a second chance. Instead, he focused on expressing his gratitude for the years they had shared and the lessons he had learned from her strength. Emily listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she took a moment before responding. "Thank you, Jack," she said, her tone calm but firm. "It takes courage to face your faults, and I appreciate your honesty. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to what was. I've moved on, and I hope you can too." Her words, though painful, carried a note of finality that Jack knew he had to accept. For the first time, he felt a strange sense of peace. Emily's forgiveness wasn't about absolving him, it was about freeing them both from the weight of the past. For Emily, the meeting was a closing chapter. As she walked away from the cafe, she felt a renewed sense of clarity. Jack's apology had been sincere, but it only reinforced her resolve to continue building the life she had reclaimed. Back at her office, Emily focused on the company's future. Under her leadership, the business had not only stabilized but begun to thrive. She implemented ethical practices that garnered praise from investors and inspired loyalty among employees. Each success felt like a vindication of her efforts, a testament to her ability to rise above the pain of betrayal. Her personal life, too, was blossoming. Ryan, who had stood by her through every challenge, had become an integral part of her journey. Their friendship, once rooted in shared struggles, had grown into something deeper. Ryan admired Emily's resilience, and she found comfort in his steady presence. One evening, as they sat together on her balcony overlooking the city, Ryan took her hand. "You've built something amazing, Emily," he said, his voice full of admiration. "And I'd like to be part of it if you'll let me." Emily smiled, her heart warming at his words. For the first time in years, she felt open to the possibility of love not as a necessity, but as a choice. "I think I'd like that," she replied softly, her voice steady with hope. For Jack, redemption became a lifelong journey. Though he had lost his place in Emily's life, he found solace in the work he was doing to better himself and contribute to his community. The lessons he had learned from his failures shaped him into a humbler, more introspective man. Emily's path continued to flourish, her story inspiring others to rise above adversity with grace and strength. And though their lives had diverged, Jack and Emily both found peace in the knowledge that their shared past, however painful, had brought them to where they were meant to be. As the chapter closed on Emily and Jack's intertwined yet separate journeys, it became clear that both had found their paths toward growth and redemption. Emily emerged stronger, reclaiming her identity and creating a life built on resilience, self-respect, and hope. Her leadership and personal triumphs inspired those around her, proving that even in the face of betrayal, one can rebuild and thrive. Jack, too, found meaning in his fall. Through humility and introspection, he began to reshape his life, determined to live with integrity and purpose. While their lives would never cross in the same way again, the lessons they learned from their past bound them in an unspoken understanding. Thank you for joining us in this heartfelt journey. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of life, love, and resilience. Don't miss our next video. Turn on notifications now.